Free microphone.
All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Kalayim, Pedig Beis, Halacha Beis, and Halacha Gimel. We will be learning today Daf Yud Gimel. We left off on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, right? Second, third line from the top of the Amud Halacha Beis. And now, in this new Mishnah, we're going to be speaking about a person who planted a wheat field. Just as an example, the person now decides to replant the same field with barley. The prohibition of kalayim isn't only to plant two different species at the same time. The prohibition of kalayim is also that if a field is already planted, let's say with wheat, you may not plant barley there prior to removing, to nullifying the wheat first. And the question is, how is one to do it? There is the wrong way of doing it. There's the right way of doing it. We're going to come to the point where for you to nullify, destroy that seed that was planted first, you're going to have to turn over the field. You basically have to plow over the field. But what's fascinating when it comes to agriculture is that when you put a seed into the ground, prior to the seed germinating, prior to the phase of masla'as, we're going to understand that as the seed, as we learn a lot in Hasidus, has to decompose in the ground. It's amazing. And that is what stimulates the koyach ha'ilada, the koyach ein soif in the land, for it to reproduce the type of seed that was put in there, that stimulated this koyach ein soif that Hashem put in the ground. Prior to it germinating, plowing over the field is not going to accomplish much, because the seed will just be moved from one place to the other. So the wheat, instead of growing here, will grow there. So you have to know that you need to wait until a certain point. And then when you plow over the field, when you turn over the ground, that will destroy the seed that was planted there first. And now you can plant your new type of seed. So we're going to learn about that principle. We're going to learn about that there were different types of plowings. There were plowings in which the furrows were close one to the other, a more intense type of plowing. We will see in our Mishnah that you don't need to do such an intense type of plowing. We're going to give a name to the type of plowing that is a minimal type of plowing that will suffice. The Mishnah actually will then give a second opinion, an even more lenient opinion. And then we will have in the Gemara, we're going to link Halacha Beis to the first Mishnah we learned in this chapter, where we had Shitas Rabbi Yosi, as we'll see. And because of this linkage, we will actually conclude in the Gemara that in our Mishnah, there are really three opinions of Tanoim. This is in brief the sugya of Halacha Beis. Halacha Gimel, that will start in Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, will now discuss, similar but not the same, when a person planted a field, let's say again of wheat, but he doesn't want to replace it with barley, he wants to replace it with a vineyard. B'chlal, when it comes to kilei akedem, as we keep on learning, the prohibition of mixing a vine with other grains is a lot more severe. It's an isur that also, not only may you not do it, but the product is completely prohibited, not only for consumption, but bahana. And because of the chumra d'oraisa, we also learned that midrabanan, you may not plant kilei hakedem even b'chutz la'aretz, unlike kilei zeroyim, that afilu midrabanan, it's mutter for me and a lay to make a vegetable patch and to hack together over there all the types of vegetables that I would like. And there's so many nuances of basic foundational laws of agriculture, the way Chazal, the way the Torah describes it, that without doubt, Daf Yud Gimel will be a very easy, a very informational, and a very foundational daf to our Masechta Kalayim. Okay, so without any further ado, Chevra, let's go right inside. In Daf Yud Gimel, we're starting now, Halacha Beis. Says the Holy Mishnah. The example the Mishnah is giving, a person has a field in which one already planted it with wheat, and the nimlach, and now you change your mind, you want to plant it with barley, which means that you have to get rid of the wheat prior to a certain point, the charisha, the plowing over, the turning over the ground, will not be enough, because like we mentioned, all that you will accomplish is you're going to move the seed from location A to location B, but it's still going to be in there. So what you need to do is yamtin la atshe. We're going to go with the girsashe tasliyam, and there are two general understandings of the word tasliyam. Right, one will be the word tasliya from the word worm, which means that you have to wait for the seed of wheat to actually begin to take root. And the initial stage of the root is where the root is so delicate and so thin that it looks worm-like. The other understanding of tasliya, the one that we're going to go with, that the word tasliya means to decompose. The decomposition is that which happens even prior to the tasliya worm type. But we're going to go with that nonetheless. And the point is that only when the wheat seed becomes very vulnerable, very weakened, then is it subject for it being nullified, for it being destroyed when you plow over it. And that takes some time. So first you have to wait until, let's use the words, it decomposes. Right, he's teaching over here in the English until it germinates. But I'm going to use the word decomposes. And only then, and then you turn the soil over, which is an act of plowing, which is an act of chadisha, and that will destroy the wheat seed. And only after you did that, and only afterwards, may you plant the barley. Okay. Now, I want you to know, as we'll see in a moment, that after you put seeds in the ground, if anyone here was involved in the plantation of, let's say, of a wheat field, of a barley field, you also have to plow the ground over, because you need for the seeds to be fully submerged in or covered over by earth. And the act of throwing the seed on the ground in itself is not the final act of planting. So generally, when you plant, there is charisha, zriya, and charisha. And this is something that I think we spoke about when we learned over there, I think Daf Ayin Gimel, right? Shabbos Ayin Gimel, when we learned about the Klal Gadol, the Lamates Malachis, and the Seder of the Mishnah is, if I remember correctly, right, is not ha-chodesh v'ha-zoreya. It's not the Seder of the Mishnah. I think the Seder of the Mishnah there is zoreya and chodesh. And I think the Gemara speaks about it. Why are we going in that order? But I want you to know, because actually after Zriya, you do an act of charisha. So there's a chiddush in the Mishnah. In other words, one would have thought, plant the barley first, then anyways, after you plant a new seed, you do another act of turning over the soil, and you will benefit. That one act of turning the soil will both cover the barley and will destroy the wheat. And that's what the Mishnah is saying. You can't do that. You don't have that option. You have to do you have to work more. First, you have to wait until it germinates, until it decomposes. Then you do an act of charisha. Then you put the barley seed. And if you have to do another act of charisha, that's life. Okay. Now let's go further. Im simcha, if the first seed in the example of the Mishnah is wheat, not only did it decompose, not only, let's go with the tasliya, that it began to take root when the root is very delicate, it's worm-like in appearance. No, more. It took root, and now it's already breaking through the ground. That's the type of tasmiach. So lo yoymar, you cannot say that Ezra v'acharkach oifeich, I'm going to plant the barley, like we just explained, and then I'm going to turn over the soil. Again, with the advantage that the same act of oifeich, which is needed after you put a seed in, will also be uprooting the part of the wheat that already broke through the soil. You may not do that. You have to first be hoifech, and then you have to be zoireya. That's the whole point. Why? You plan to do.
Meaning you have to uproot the bud, and then you have to be zoya.
That's
but
right.
In between, you have to do charisha or no?
So
between the zria. Do you understand my question? Did I understand you right?
You understood me right, Yakir. In other words, the Mishnah is saying like this, that even when a person intends to do something, which everyone knows has to happen, when I put barley in the ground, after the wheat was already matzmiach, I'm going to have to do another charisha for the barley. And when I'm going to do a charisha, the more the wheat is be'en, the more the charisha will destroy it. That's the irony. When the wheat is still a kernel, doing charisha won't destroy the wheat. It's just going to move the seed around. Now that the wheat got bigger, now that it broke through the ground, everyone knows the act of charisha will destroy it. Mishnah wants to emphasize you're not allowed to do it, because prior to you doing charisha, if you put barley in the ground, you are planting two species together.
But isn't the first harisha much?
Before Kevin, I want to go back to Yakir. Now, what happens? The Mishnah never spoke about the time in between Tasliya and Simcha. What about that time? Like the Mishnah is speaking about, you have to wait until Tasliya. Then the Mishnah says, in Simcha, you still cannot do it. You may never put the new seed prior to destroying the old one. The reason why the Mishnah said im simcha, when really it's not just im simcha, it's mi ha'asla until the end. It's because once the wheat broke through the ground and it's visible, one might have thought, of course the person is going to get rid of the wheat. He sees the wheat. Everyone knows you're not allowed to plant kilei seroim. There is no fear you might forget. If the seed did not break through the ground, maybe you can say it's a chumrah. You have to first do the charisha to destroy the old because you might forget to do it. No, even though we know you're not going to forget, you can see it. Because at no point are you allowed to plant the new seed prior to turning over the ground, and the turning over the ground will not be effective before it's tasliya, before it germinates, before it decomposes. Okay, what are you saying?
Isn't the first harisha much more deeper than the second one? The second one is only to cover. The first one is to pretty much destroy everything.
Yes. Now, it's very good. See, Mamash, we're going to start learning about all that. In today's daf, Kevan, we're not going to be learning about the depth of the plow. What we will be learning about is the space between furrow and furrow. And that will be a very important topic that we're going to have right now. Okay, says the Mishnah, that's the next stop. Very good, leave that picture up there. In other words, I waited until it decomposed. My intent is to destroy the wheat. What type of furrow must I make? And the Mishnah gives us a very lenient type of plowing, and that is what the Mishnah calls ketalme harevia. The word revia is rain. Which is exactly what happens when the rain hits the ground. All right. The Talmud Revia would mean the furrows of the rain. The furrows of the rain, as the Marav Fulda explains, that you do not need to turn over the entire surface of the field. Narvas, as long as the furrows are placed at a separation which is very light, which is very large, which is what people do after it rains. If you make that type of plowing, which is a relatively minimal type of plowing, that suffices, that's enough. Let's read this inside the Marafulda, 3 lines from the top. That Misha Hafach we don't say that you have to make small furrows. Small furrows is not about the depth, cave and clear. Small furrows would mean smuchim zelazeh. You don't say they have to be in close proximity. When I make furrows in close proximity, I get every single germinated seed. I will completely destroy it. If I'm leaving relatively more space between furrow, then I'm leaving, maybe there was a place where I didn't fully turn it over. Not a problem. Ella ketalme haravia. which means that they make furrows that are big, meaning they're very separated one from the other. You know when they do that? That's independent of the seed. They do it after the rain falls. That is the type of plowing that's needed, and you don't have to plow it more than that. Next in Abba Shaul Omer, and as we will see in the Gemara, Abba Shaul agrees with the leniency of the Tanna Kama, and he adds another leniency. Another leniency. Now, the Tanna Kama does not agree with it. But what is he saying? That Kedei Shelo Yishai Roiv Ala Beiso. Now let's go back to what we learned in the first Mishnah. And even though it got a little bit nuanced, and not everyone was here, doesn't matter. We learned the general rule of the first Mishnah is that if seeds gets mixed inadvertently, the mixture only becomes a problem if there is the ratio of Roiv Ala. Now let's apply it to our case. A person has a wheat field. They did what the Mishnah said. They waited until the seeds germinated. They plowed over the field b'kavana to destroy the wheat. They didn't have to make a thorough plowing. They made what's called talmei haraviyah. The question now is, do I have to make talmei haraviyah throughout the entire field? Tanna Kama says, yeah. Abba Shaul says, no, you don't even have to do the whole field. You know what you need to do? When you come to the last shtickle of the field, that the ratio of what you will b'chlal not plow over will be less than the Roiv Ala. You are planting barley in the whole field, which means that the ratio there will be some place in the field where there's going to be wheat and barley. Doesn't matter.
In other words, memai through plowing.
Because since you don't want to have the mixture, you are destroying the wheat. It's amazing. And in Kavana, you can't do anything. To plant one seed of barley and wheat together, you can't do. To plant lechatchila, there's no roiv ala. But here, you're not planting them together. The issue of our Mishnah is not about planting together. The wheat was planted before. You want to make it into barley. You're chayiv to uproot. Says Abba Shaul, you don't have to uproot mamish the whole field. Kedei, as long as there won't be a roiv ala beisa. Even if there's going to be a drop less than the roiv ala beisa, you're good.
Does that mean the distance between the teeth of the plow? Are we saying if you look at a plow, are we talking about how the?
No. The Gemara will go more into roiv ala. So, Kevin, whoever can see the pictures over here on the Zoom, it's not about the teeth of the plow. It's about the space between one furrow and the other. And we'll see. I mean, I can tell you what the Gemara says. Well, let's read it inside. It's a lot more about the space between one and the other. Between one furrow and how much width do you leave between one and the other? Okay. Says the Gemara. Now, again, we're mamash learning the dinim of agriculture. It's also amazing that one would think that every seed has its own time of how long does it need for it to decompose. And it could be, just for the record, it could be that there is individualized rules, but it begins with the general klal. And the klal says, the Gemara, kama hi masla'as, how long does it take? Again, whether maslas means to begin taking root, whether maslas means the way we're going to learn it, to decomposes. How long does it take to decompose? Until it has been in the earth for 3 days. Now, is there a difference between seed and seed? The Gemara doesn't speak about it, but the Gemara will say there's a difference between earth and earth. When is 3 days enough? Tina means clay. Tina in this context would mean when the earth is moist. But if the earth is very dry, then it needs more time. If stays LA is dry, needs more time.
If it needs more time, what's the
The Gemara doesn't give. It's amazing. And I don't think every seed is the same. I don't think it matters. The Gemara is giving you general out rules. I do want to make one link, one halachic link. And it's a halachic link that we all remember because married men practice this the whole time, right? The reason why a woman has to wait at least 5 days, kimin hagenu, or like the Sfardim, at least 4 days, or even by our minute, by dam sulam 4 days, prior to making a hefsek tara. Hefsek tara means that the dam is no longer leaving the uterus. It's because if a woman were to have a hoitzoas zera of the man that's in her body during the Shivas Nikiyim, it's going to be soiser that day. How would she know if she had a drop of zera left? She wouldn't know. What we have to make sure is that halachically, even if there is the physical remnants of the zera of the man in her body, it's halachically no longer zera. What makes it yes zera or not zera? If it can reproduce. And how long does it take? So we have halacha l'Moshe Sinai that al tikshu alisha shleishes yamim is this din 3 days. That the seed of a man in a woman's body could survive for 72 hours and not more. L'chayret's connected this to the other. Because after 72 hours, the human seed decomposes.
Yes.
I know that, and here it's not me'es last. I'm just making a link, my own link between these two din. Okay, and now the Gemara says it. And at some point, they found the Braisa. That's the way it works, the way the Babli works. In other words, if you have a Braisa, you don't need a Gemara. But this is what the guys learned. They came to that. And now, a Gavaldik Vitani came. In Ataka, we learned so in the Braisa. However, notice that there's a Braisa that the Gemara is not even quoting the beginning. The Braisa says it's 3 days. But now, the Braisa adds another thing. That halacha affects nature. And it's 3 days. I'm insisting on my 3 days. I was then, by there, Mixas hayom kukulai. Mixas hayom kukulai, for the record, that Rash Shirilio says, there's a big machlokes here. Mixas hayom kukulai doesn't only mean that the 3rd day, it also means the 1st day. Mixas hayom kukulai mamakamatina, that's the girsa. Yom rishon, vishlishi, both. Rash Shirilio is on the left column, 9 lines from the bottom. Both the 1st and the 3rd day, mixas and kukulan, meaning, by the dinim of Taras HaMishpacha, we do the opposite. The 3 days grew a beard. We have 5 days. Here, the opposite. Now, again, the differentiation, not between seeds, but between the moisture in the earth, is also sourced in Tanaic works. B'makeh matina, says the Brais, implying that if it's not b'makeh matina, if it's in a dry place, it needs more time. Lachluchius, we need to have bittul. What does bittul? The warmth, the bottom kite. If not, no one gets bottled so easy. The im simcha. Now, says the Gemara. Continuing the Braisa, that if the wheat already tzimcha, that was the case in the Mishnah, it broke through the ground. Which means he brought the cow on the field for the cow to graze. What happens when the cow grazes? Do you have an uprooting, David? What do you think? I don't think so. I think grazing means that min hasafa ulachutz, the cow was eating that which is above the ground, but you did not uproot it. When you plow, you mamish, you uproot it. That means you destroy the root. You go to the root above the ground. Okay, says the Braisa, that's the Chiddush. In other words, even though the roots remain in the ground, their capacity to grow is destroyed because they were cut above the ground. Like what the Muhammad? We have to uproot every single terrorist. Ideally, yeah. But Amo, you cut the grass above the ground. Wherever they stick their heads up, that's what's happening right now over there. That also, it does not allow them to do what they want to do.
So here in Simcha, he doesn't need to uproot the whole thing?
In other words, that's a chiddush of the Braisa that we didn't have in the Mishnah. Mishnah only spoke about plowing. Braisa is saying that once Simcha, you can put an animal to graze.
He's not worried about the Rabbi at that point?
No, that's something else. In other words, the way you are destroying the old, in this case, is only by It's superficial therapy. You're not going to the root. Good.
Isn't the cow stepping on it and destroying it also?
Not the root. That's not the way it works. Very good. Yeah, very good.
What?
The lick of the shoy. This is enough to destroy the growth.
Oh, but the animal has to do it.
Yeah, the animal has to eat it.
Oh, that itself is like that food.
That's a chiddush. What's the chiddush? I'm telling you, because the animal doesn't eat the root.
It's not the him licking it is or whatever.
Forget about licking. Eating. He's eating lunch.
Is a sign.
No. It's a way to get rid of the old to make room for the new. Right. Now, my Talmud Rabbanon. 1 second. Referring back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah asked, Kama yehi chodesh. And the chiddush of the Mishnah was, the words of the Mishnah is, Talmei haraviyah. What's the problem? The problem is that Talmei haraviyah leaves space between the furrows. Right, Kevin? And in the space between the furrows, the wheat that was planted there is not getting uprooted. Why is that enough? My Talmud Rabbanon says the Gemara, Kivin shenasandati lachroish. It's about kavanah. Since the person intends to uproot it, afilu loy ratzav. Ratzav means he didn't plow it without interruption. Between one furrow and the other, there is some space. That's good enough. That's good enough.
We don't go with the rove being destroyed?
Because what's needed over here, it's not about today, what's needed over here is a externalization, lamarasayan, that this guy doesn't want to eat. Now, I want to add one thing over here for people not to get confused. We're going to learn, as we learned, we mentioned it already. So we look what we're learning. We began learning about planting seeds together. Now we are beginning now about kilei zeroyim, not only about planting them together at the same time. You planted one, and now you're planting another one. Now let me speak another din that we never learned inside the Mishnah yet. What happens if you didn't plant anything? You only planted wheat. You planted nothing. The bees planted the wheat, and the other creature planted the barley. I'm not allowed to be mekayim in my field a mixture of zenoim. There's no doubt, don't get nervous, that if de facto, because of the leniency of the space that we are allowing in between the plows, if at the end of the story, you're going to have a ratio of roival l'sa in the field, the poil of wheat and barley, you will be chayiv to uproot it. Make no mistake about it. The question in our Mishnah is, what am I chayiv to do right now? And all of this is connected to marasayim. Because if the issue would be the item itself, then you would have to make closer furrows. And you wouldn't have a shitas abashol that says that you can leave, as long as it's less than a roivel beisah, you can leave the end. Why? Because I'm not planting them together. Everyone knows what my intent is. No one will plow over a field that was previously planted with wheat, that germinated. That means that when you're plowing it over, you're destroying it. Why would you do that? We have to know farming. You're only doing it because you don't want this to be a wheat field. So you resolve the marasayim. You can plant now. That's the word. And if later it turns out that you're going to have the wrong ratio, there'll be too much wheat left, you'll deal with it later. If a person says, I want to deal with it now, zum gesund, the person can say that. The person can say, I don't want to deal with it later. If he'll be afraid that he knows that my type of wheat is so potent and who knows, but I'm not chayiv to do more than what the Mishnah just said. Now, let's go back. We learned in the Brayso. Abba Shol Oimer. It's amazing how in the Brayso, even the Shita that we have in the Tanakama is not Abba Shol. By us in the Mishnah, the Kamei Chodesh, Kamei Revia. Then Abba Shol Oimer. Here in the Brayso, Abba Shol is the one that said, and that's important. Why is that important? Because when you learn the Mishnah, there can be two ways of understanding Abba Shol. One might have misunderstood Abba Shol, that Abba Shol is giving another leniency, but he's arguing with the Tanakama's leniency. Abba Shol says, no, you got to plow mamish. Really? Elama, you don't have to do the whole field. You can leave a little bit less than a Roiva Lebeso. So comes the Gemara by saying that Abba Shaul agrees with the Tanakama. And in addition, he has another leniency. Gaval. Now let's go to the Yud Gimel on the base. He further wants to explain. This is a Tana. What's the meaning of Talmud Avia? Vasidas Zanav Hasus Hoisanekres. That this pattern of plowing is called by the oilam, by the farming oilam in the shul, the shvans of a sus. What does that mean? See, if the kavan is to plow every single piece of ground, then you got to plow every single piece of ground. When you leave space between one and the other, you know what happens? You have to just imagine this. When you plow, so you're lifting the earth from above the ground, and it's creating a little bit of a displacement of earth on either side, on both sides of the plow, right? It's like when you make a river, there's the river bank. So when you plow with that amount of space, it's taka not one right after the other, but it's close enough that the bank, the pile of earth on the side of the plow that you made first, on the right side of the field, will be touching the end of the bank of the pile of earth that protruded from the ground from the second furrow that you made on its left side.
What do you do with the...
I just want to get, in other words, there isn't going to be any visible space of the field unplowed. And it's all about Marasayin. I think that's why it's important. The chiddush is that under these two banks, you didn't plow. And there will be some wheat that germinated that will grow. L'cha'ira, it's not vaday going to grow in the wrong proportion where you're going to have to uproot it later. Borderline. We don't care. And if later it's going to be too much of a mixture, uproot it later. But you did your job. Why is it called Zinav Asus? I have no idea. The Gemara is not saying. You have to be in the inn for that. At least, you know, it's like Gesha. You hear these expressions, and we're like the Bali Tshuva. We have no idea where it came from, but at least we feel cool. We know, I know the lingo. Aznav Asus. The Seif HaFarash, I think I understand why. Because I think the sus is a derogatory statement. And I think because you didn't do something thorough, but it looks like you did it thorough. It looks like it's thorough. The whole field is filled with earth. When really, underneath here and underneath there, you're garnish getan. Ashvans van aferd. It's a cynical statement. It's a person who didn't work, but they make believe they're working. Honey, I'm going to work, and they leave with a suitcase, with a briefcase, and they go and they come back with all the trauma they had today, and they spend the whole day by the beach. I think something like that. Okay.
Sounds great. Rabbi, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, 1 second. Yes.
If I have a field, like you said before, this is giving us the rules of what you're allowed to do. But if you actually see wheat growing, you have to remove it, right?
If there is the proportion of Roiva Lebeisam, we're always going to come back to that.
I mean, if I see a single wheat stalk in the middle of my barley field that clearly grew with like next to the barley, do I have to uproot it or
not that ratio? We'll learn it inside, but there's some point where you have to uproot it, and that was that mashmiya malakalayim. We learned that in the beginning of Masechta Shkolim. I think we learned this together. Yeah. We're going to learn about it clear. Don't worry, we'll learn about it. And then there was when there were mashmiya, and then remember that whole saying, and then there came a time where if you didn't uproot the minimum, they penalized you. They uprooted your whole field. Then people says, I'm a chaya, let Beis Din work for me. There was like phases and how they made different takanas.
Sure. Then they abused it, right? And they let them do the work for them, right?
That's right, Kevin.
Right.
Yes.
Are we concerned all about Rabbi Yossi's last?
Oh, very good, very good. Oh, wait. That's exactly where we're getting. Video. So now says the Gemara. So we made it clear. Abba Shaul agrees with the Tanakama because in the Braisa we quoted him Beshitas Tanakama, and in addition, he says you don't have to do the whole field. My Tamada Abba Shaul. So he says, you did the whole field, plus you already began the last roiva, which means if you'll stop now, there won't be roiva lebeisa. Guys, roiva lebeisa is the problematic ratio. You already began the last roiva, so ibazoi dayoi, because now you won't have the entire field. Okay. Now, all this is based on the understanding, which is correct, that Abba Shaul is even more lenient than the Tanna Kama. Let's go back to what we learned in the first Mishnah. What happens if you have seeds that initially had the mixture of Roiv and Lasal? Remember that? What now? Machlokes Tanoi. Tanna Kama, our Mishnah did not give a name, said you might. Rabbi Yossi says, no, once you already have a problematic mixture, then you have to avoid. That was the word. Yover means you have to completely remove. Now we're going to apply this over here. You already had wheat in there. You want to plant barley. You have to uproot the wheat. I know that it's not exactly the same because in the first Mishnah, they were already mixed. Here, you're going to mix it, but we're not acknowledging that difference. According to Rabbi Yossi, we cannot accept what Abba Shaul was saying. Because once you trigger a problem, according to Rabbi Yossi, you have to get rid of all of it. So says the Gemara that Ma Abba Shaul can Rabbi Yossi. What do you think? Can Abba Shaul hold like Rabbi Yossi? No, he cannot. If you're going to subscribe to Rabbi Yossi, which would be the Tanna Kama here, he doesn't say what Abba Shaul says. Then you can't say, well, I already went into the last, now there's less. That's called Yamai. No, the Abba Shaul will be like the Rabbanan in the first mission. The Rabbanan, Amri, the Kivin Shenos Anate Lachroish, Afilo Loi Rotzaf, Abba Shaul Loimer Mikivin Shehischil Boroi Vadayoi, Rabbi Yossi Oimer Tzarech Lahashlam Eskol Aroiva. So the Gemara concludes, now that we are linking, rightfully so, Abba Shaul, not like Rabbi Yossi, which would mean that Rabbi Yossi argues. So if someone is going to ask you, how many opinions do we have without learning Braisos? See, that was, they looked for more work. Now the Gemara Chaps, there are 3 opinions. According to the Tanna Kama, what do you have to do? The only leniency is that you don't have to make the thorough close to one to the other. But other than that, you got to do the whole field. They don't say. Abba Shaul says, in addition, you only have to begin into the last Raiva. Once you did the whole field, already in the last Raiva, the end you can leave. And Rabbi Yossi will disagree with that. Now that we made that linkage. So these are going to be the 3 opinions. Atkan, Kilei Zeroin.
Isn't Rabbi Yossi say you might or Yavor? No?
Yavor. The Gemara suggesting
that
according to Rabbi Yossi, even though there's a big chiddush in the Gemara, because you didn't yet plant any barley yet. But the Gemara understands that Alashitas Rabbi Yossi, you can't get away by saying, I did the whole field and I only left less than a base raiva. Is it okay? No, you got to do the whole field. You only have to make the furrows Katalme Haravia, but you got to do the whole field. Okay, now let's move on to Kilei Akerem. And like we mentioned, generally, Kilei Akerem is a lot more chamur. Will the same system be enough when you want to plant a vineyard? Now we're going in either direction. Either first you planted a vineyard and now you want to get rid of the vineyard to plant wheat, or you planted wheat and now you want to use that same earth to plant a vineyard. So says the Mishnah, Zerua is used for seeds. Nitiya is used for trees. Obviously, our Mishnah is not speaking about any other tree other than a vine, because we learned, and we'll repeat this, that midoraisa and midrabanan, there is no problem mixing, planting together trees with wheat, and trees and legumes, and trees and vegetables, not in Eretz Yisrael, even lachatchil. The problem with trees is grafting. We're not talking about grafting. So when the Mishnah is addressing a problem of zeriya and netiyah, the netiyos must be vines. Okay, says the Mishnah, zerua in that direction. If first you planted it with wheat, and now the nimlach lita. Now you again the same idea. You change your mind in the same space on the same season. You're saying, "Oh, I want to plant vines, grape vines." Says the Mishnah, lo yoimar. Don't say first eta. I'm going to plant the trees. Like we mentioned in the previous Mishnah, that even after the act of zeriya, you need to have a certain level of charisha to make sure that the seeds that you planted are covered in earth. Charisha is what's needed to get rid of the old. So again, one might think, okay, I'll plant anew, I'll make the charisha, which will get rid of the old. You're not allowed to do that. Ella first, like we had in the previous Mishnah. And another thing that our Mishnah doesn't even have to write, when do you do the hoifech? We already had in the previous Mishnah. You can't do the hoifech when you wake up, I want to do it. Let's go with a 3-day period. I planted it today. Tomorrow, I'm deciding I want to plant a vineyard. You can't do the hoifech yet. You have to wait for the seeds to germinate. You're not going to go into the ground and take out every seed. And you have to have the 3 days, however you cheshbon it, mixed in kakuloi, if the earth is moist. These are the rules that we're having in our Gemara. I'm sure there are many other.
Why would you think even plant first and then?
It's easier.
Why?
Because since
when
you plant them, and after the act of planting, you have to do another type of charish. Charish, you have to, like we're saying, that's the chiddush, because you want to cover the seeds. So everyone that's observing is going to say, we know you're going to do charisha. It's not enough. You can't do that. Because prior to the charisha, you have two types that may not be together, the vine and the wheat. This is in that direction. Now, what about in the other direction? If first Natuya, first you planted the vines, and now you're saying, V'nimlach l'zoyram, lo yoimer ezra v'chakach es shareish. Again, you're going to kill two birds with the same stone. I'm going to plant wheat. I'm going to have to make a charisha anyways. You're not allowed to do that. Ella, first mishareish, v'chakach zoreyam. But here we're going to have a leniency that we didn't have until now. What will be the leniency? Only in this direction. It's not shaykh in the other direction. Here again, we're speaking about you planted the vines. At any point, you want to now make it into a barley field. Says our Mishnah, if you want, right? The word was misharish. Misharish means taking it out from the root. You don't have to do that. You can raise the vines close to the ground, as long as it is within 1 tefach from the ground, then zoireya, and then misharesh. The fact that the Mishnah says then misharesh means that you bringing the vine within a tefach of the ground didn't really get rid of the vine. It's not like we had in the Gemara the animal eating the food. You know what it does? It makes it clear to the observer what your intention is. And here we're learning a big thing, that even by Kilei HaKerem, if I do something that serves as an indication of what I am planning to do, it has halachic weight. And here there will be an advantage. What's my advantage? My advantage is because here I do get to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, if that's the right or wrong expression. Because anyways, I have to make a plowing because I put into the ground the kernels of wheat. And that plowing will be misharesh. I don't even know if the act of charisha will be effective enough if you didn't take the vines close to the ground. So here you get a little bit of a lazy. Take it down. It has to be within a tefach. No one brings a vine within a tefach if they don't plan to get rid of it. So it's a clear indication of what your intention is. Here, now you can plant the wheat and then you can turn over the ground. Okay, weiter.
There's no way to lift up seeds.
You can lift up a seed, but you're not going to destroy it because you're just going to move it. Now the Mishnah will speak about exceptional products that moving them around, charisha b'chlal won't stop them from growing. And we are not going to be good as cannabis, because cannabis will get destroyed if you plow over it. So it cannot be that. We're not doing it because of it. But the Mishnah says karbos. Karbos in English is called caraway. Sotasach geholfen. And even if you look at a picture on Google, it's not going to help you either. Just to know the Mishnah. The words are holy. Karbos or luf. Luf is a type of legume whose bulbs grow under the ground. Sollst du wissen sein, lo yehi zoreya uba al gabeyem. You may not plant over them, Even if you plowed over the field after they germinated, there's such akshanim that you can't get rid of them. When you plow over, you'll again move here to there. She'einon oisim elo l'shalishanim. Something that endures in the ground so long before they begin to develop. 3 years. You can't say, well, even after the 3 years, you have to wait for it to grow. Guys, we're not speaking about trees that are residual. We're speaking about legumes or vegetables. You plant, it grows, the nigmar asipur. You have to wait until the product is ready. Harvest the product, and now you go ahead and you can change the function of the ground. How great is that?
Rambam's Girsa, I believe it's Kindis. It writes that together of Kilaya Kerms, they grow together with the Kerm for 3 years. And he uses that.
The problem with that's this Girsa. The problem is that the Mitzias, cannabis doesn't have that potency that when you put it into the ground, it actually grows 3 years later. The whole business of the cannabis, no one has patience in LA to wait for 3 years. They're putting it in the ground, and the guy is smoking weed. 2 days later, they make it grow quicker. I don't know how they do it.
Whether it is
okay, weiter. Now let's go back. Now, says the Mishnah. Now we're beginning to touch, like we mentioned before already. We're not speaking about seeds that got mixed. We're not speaking about you who planted 2 different things, one after the other, avad and not, God forbid, at the same time in the Holy Land. No, you planted one type. Happens to be that beteva, because of the winds, because of the animals, because the way it works, is that other seeds were introduced into your seed without your knowledge, without your intent. So we learned that generally, at some point, it creates a problem in which you will be chayiv to uproot that mixture. So now the Mishnah says that if you have tvua goes to any of the grains, that if in it grew out sfiche, means you did not plant it. The aftergrowth means it came on its own. And we're speaking about isatis. Isatis is a plant whose leaves were used to produce a blue color, a blue dye. Right? I think isatis. What does the Mishnah say about tchelis? It should not be like this. So it creates a certain blue type of color. Guys, a threshing floor is a place that you want for it to remain smooth. You don't want for anything to grow there. So again, no one planted it, but it happened that it grew out over there. By the way, sfiche isatis is very detrimental to tvua. Anything growing on the threshing floor, which is the area that you want to be smooth and flat, anything growing there is detrimental. Third case, tilson, let's go with fenugreek. Shehe'elos minei asavim. That it's going to be, tilson is expensive, if you remember, and any type of grass, Lenny, or weeds that grows with fenugreek will degrade the quality of the tilson. So the Mishnah gave 3 examples in which you as a farmer, whatever was mixed in there by nature is something that you don't want for there to be there. Because of that, the Mishnah has a use chiddush. Ein mechayven oisam lenakesh. You don't have to weed it out. Wow. Since in all of these grades, that's the point, that the foreign plant damages, it's mazik, it damages the cultivated crop. You don't have to remove it immediately. I want to add the word, and we're going to get more of that in the Gemara. You can't have a mixture. Question is, when are you chayiv to remove it? So something that you, because of dinah de mamoina, it's bad for your business, everyone knows you will uproot it, the immediacy is removed. Who says that? The Mara folder. Let's look inside the Mara folder. I think it's 5 lines under the Mishnah, under the Gemara. You don't have to weed it out. So he says, why not? So the Mara folder makes it clear. It's not that you can leave it there. No, the Mishnah means to say you don't have to remove it immediately. Why? The Malaf Hachi Soifalak is called you will uproot it. Why? These cases. Is bad Latvua. Asavim Kashim Latilsan. If you planted the Tilsan Lamaichaladim. I don't know why the Manafulda went out of the Seder of our gifts in the Mishnah. Nami Kashala any Zeroyim, because Shemachlidin Oisa and that area won't be fit for the function of plowing if there's stuff growing out of the ground. So now, what is immediately, what is later? Let's first learn the principle. The big thing, not you don't have to do it at all. You don't have to do it right away. Just the word, and isach means weeded, just to know the words. Kisach means you cut down. Keep on going that, right? Nikesh David means from the root. Kisach means from the ground. Once you begin to do it, you don't have this kula anymore. See, if a guy is going to say, okay, I have this in my tour, I don't have to do it now. I can leave it. If I begin to uproot it, then they tell me uproot the whole field. Because if I do a little bit and I leave the rest, marasai, it looks like I don't mind the rest. I'm not going to do it later.
Is what you want?
Yeah, now that you began, correct. Take out the one that you don't want, to leave the one that you want, but now you triggered the immediacy obligation of taking out the foreign seed. A very important point. It's when do you have on these three cases, and similar cases where it's mazik, you don't have to do it right away. Okay, so don't do it right away. But once you began, you have to go until the end. Atkan, the Mishnah, Gavalde, God willing, tomorrow we're beginning to think about it.
Is like the first Mishnah?
What are you?
Because of you mixed it now, as opposed to you just changing your mind?
No. Here is that you didn't do anything at all. It happened by itself.
Oh.
Here it happened by itself. And normally what we learned right now is you have to uproot it immediately. And you don't have to do it in these three cases.